Mirror's Edge is a game that isn't quite like anything else released in the modern era. You see, in most games, running is a means to an end, something you have to do in order to reach your objective. But in Mirror's Edge, the very objective itself is to run. When the game was released back in 2008, it was met with generally positive reviews and gained a cult following of sorts in the years since. The question now is, does the game still live up to that standard 14 years later? Let's find out. In Mirror's Edge, you play as Faith Connors, a young runner who traverses a large cityscape via parkour to deliver important information. You travel rooftops, sewers, office buildings, and more in order to avoid the watchful eye of city surveillance. The near-future city is peaceful and clean on the surface, but is only able to maintain the status due to oppressive government control over its citizens. The utopic presentation of this unnamed city reveals a deeply troubled dystopia once you look past the shimmering glass. The people have happily traded their freedom and privacy for a comfortable life. The city is silently in a police state, and the modern architecture and bright colors mask the reality of what's happening. Runners are some of the few people who reject the status quo, and that doesn't make Big Brother very happy. Police are tasked with taking you down and will shoot first and ask questions later. Throughout the narrative of the game, you'll uncover a conspiracy to maintain control and eliminate any threats to the powers that be. There are twists and turns and genuine surprises that make the story enjoyable and worth paying attention to. So the story is definitely a plus, but the gameplay, level design, and overall atmosphere, those are the stars of the game. The city DICE created is one of the best and most unique settings I've ever played in a video game. Striking colors are painted throughout, including a glowing white that gives the city an uncomfortable uniformity with a smattering of red, orange, blue, and green. The game does show its age in some areas, but the art style has managed to help the title stand out as one of the better looking ones of the mid-2000s. You'll spend a lot of your time on rooftops, jumping between skyscrapers, scaling ledges, jumping on scaffolding, sliding down pipes, and more in order to quickly traverse this dystopic city. When not up high, you'll travel below, navigating train stations, storm drains, city streets, and more. Mirror's Edge, which can be completed in just a handful of hours, is filled to the brim with varied locations. The game is packed with a wide variety of settings that all feel distinct and offer unique challenges. Parkour is the main gameplay loop, and what makes Mirror's Edge a timeless classic. For most of the game, you'll simply run through levels and navigate obstacles in order to complete the mission. You can run, wall run, jump, climb, slide, and roll, and combine each move to efficiently traverse the city. Navigating a rooftop and combining moves to seamlessly get through an area is a repeated dopamine hit that feels amazing whether it's your first or 100th time playing the game. You want to replay each mission just to perfect your skills and progress through a level without losing any momentum. Any false move in Mirror's Edge could slow you down or lead to your demise, whether that be falling off a ledge to the streets below or being hit by an oncoming train. This parkour gameplay, while straightforward and repetitive, is simultaneously complex and rewarding. Expert players are able to take full advantage of the game's systems and fly through levels without a second wasted. For newer players, experimenting with the game's mechanics and learning efficient routes through a level is a satisfying experience that rewards practice. DICE created an all-time great gameplay loop here, and it's one not many other games since have been able to replicate. While parkour is the star of the game, combat also exists on the other end of the spectrum. The mix of hand-to-hand and occasional gameplay feels so underwhelming and underdeveloped that skipping these scenarios feels necessary to have a satisfying experience. Faith does not have any weapons on her own, so she must first engage hand-to-hand and then has the option to pick weapons up once enemies are downed. This usually involves just spamming the right trigger and landing body shots until enemies fall over. Melee feels sluggish, non-reactive, and an overall waste of time. Gunplay somehow feels worse, as Mirror's Edge features a suite of generic guns that all feel terrible to use. It really is as though if the game would be better served if the combat was completely removed. There is very little redeeming about the system, and it's a surprise DICE of all studios could make combat feel this underwhelming. Back to the good though, the soundtrack in Mirror's Edge perfectly matches the game and provides an incredibly immersive atmosphere. Swedish electronic music artist Solarfield composed the music for the title, and its mix of futuristic synthpop gives Mirror's Edge an ethereal feeling that matches the city's utopic aesthetic. The OST for this game is one that I've listened to for years, and is simply one of the best scores of any video games ever made. In conclusion, Mirror's Edge remains a timeless classic 14 years after release. The game's overarching theme of endless government surveillance is one that is just as relevant today as it was back in 2008. The parkour gameplay is one of the best gameplay loops I've ever played, and the Nameless City is one of the most memorable video game settings in recent memory. The soundtrack has aged beautifully and is one that I often go back to. Of course, while Mirror's Edge does a lot extremely well, the combat is a complete miss. Luckily, parkour is able to mostly compensate. This is a game you should absolutely check out, and if you're a Game Pass subscriber, it's free to download, leaving you no excuse not to experience one of the most unique games of the modern era.